Dr. Martin Vinokur played Division III tennis at Clark University and holds a master's degree in history from Columbia and a PhD in political science from the American University. He turned his doctoral dissertation on sports and politics in Eastern Europe into a book. He joined the USPTA in the 1960s and was a high school tennis coach for 22 years and served as the New York State Schools tennis coordinator for a decade. He's been recognized as the USPTA Eastern High School Coach of the Year and founded Tennis Europe in 1973. Martin, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'll echo what Mitch had said. Thanks so much for creating this webinar series. Those of us who are in the travel business have some free time these days, so it's good to be able to talk to like-minded, interested tennis coaches from the Southern section.
Well, it's fantastic having you. Now, your company, Tennis Europe, has been providing juniors with tennis travel and training for almost 5 decades. What prompted you to start your business?
Well, actually, the story goes back to when I was coaching high school tennis in Long Island, New York, and we weren't a very good team. In fact, we were terrible. And most of my players came to me as sophomores, had never even played tennis before. And we were going up against kids who had been playing USTA tournaments since the 8s and 10s. So this was an effort which was actually suggested by one of my players on my team who had a cousin who lived in Germany and said, hey, Coach, why don't we go to Europe and play in tennis tournaments during the summer? Maybe if we have, 10, 15, 20 matches in 3 weeks, come back and do better in our high school season. So that first year we went with 5 players and myself, and that was it. And then the next year, aided by an article in Tennis Magazine, we suddenly had 18 players, and then we kept growing and growing. And our second year, we actually had about 17 players, and 7 of them went on to the Pro Tour, including our first player from the Southern section, Mel Purcell of Murray, Kentucky. However, the trip is aimed more at the unranked high school varsity players. We have different levels of teams. We have most of our teams for people getting tournament experience the first time, and then we have 1 or 2 teams where we have primarily ranked players. So we just grew and grew by word of mouth and by people saying good things about us.
Now, you said that second trip you had 17 players. Was that was 17 players all in the same trip?
Actually, we usually take between 14 and 16 players, 2 full-time coaches and an assistant director and myself. But on that particular trip, we had actually 3 coaches and we had 18 players. We usually take 1 coach, mostly USPTA certified, of course, 1 coach to every 5 or 6 players.
Okay, and so you have these coaches. I mean, what does the kind of coaching end of it look like when the players are there? They're playing all of these matches over so many weeks. I mean, you have a system in place for evaluating the players and then providing feedback to them? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. The goal of the trip, as said before, was to give the players a lot of match play in a very short period of time to follow up on the work that our USPTA pros do at the clinics. Many of the coaches have said at the conventions, the people get enough lessons and they get enough practice. The big gap is that they don't play enough matches. And as we discovered when we went to Europe, many of the players in Europe had been playing, matches going to multiple countries for years and years. So our goal, play a lot of matches in a very short period of time. The second point is it doesn't make much sense to take players and then not tell them what they're doing wrong. So the second point is to take notes, do analysis, do smartphone or error charts or running commentaries, and discuss these matches with the players at the conclusion of their matches. So we'll sit down with the player, we'll say, here's what you did right, in order to encourage confidence, obviously, but also here's where you need to improve. Now, we then get them on the practice courts between the tournaments, and we work on correcting the mistakes they've made in the matches. We have group practice sessions, and besides your traditional conditioning and point play, we'll also have some verbal instruction to improve a player's ability to do the skill better. And one of the things that's been so satisfying about this trip is we can take a kid who maybe is a good high school player, has very little match or no match experience, and in 2.5, 3.5 weeks, you can physically see the improvement. And it's not just a stroke improvement or strategy improvement, it's also a mental improvement. You can see they're playing with more confidence. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention we play on red clay, which is a surface the USTA applauds that all Americans should have some clay court background, because the set of skills you learn over there is totally different from the set of skills you learn on a hard court. And a point I always make to our teaching pros is this: we do not make any major changes in your player's game. We're more about correctives. We're more about fine-tuning. We're more about how to apply what you've done in your local clinic. We've actually found that to prepare for our trip, teaching pros get more lessons with their players, and then when they come back, our kids are so psyched, they want to take additional lessons. And we only take them for 2.5 or 3.5 weeks, Kevin. And so the home pro will still have, 10, 12 weeks at home during the summer to be able to work with the player both before and after the trip. We kind of see Tennis Europe as a capstone. It's a great way. Everybody gets super excited about travel and tennis to see what life is like overseas. And I should also mention, it's a personal growth experience. It's not just tennis. It's something that a kid can learn more responsibility, can gain more confidence, can become a real member of a team. The team atmosphere is very strong on this trip. We play individual tournaments. They're sanctioned by their governing bodies. Every tournament we play qualifies a player for Universal Tennis Rating, UTR. So they're not going to miss out on improving their UTR by joining us with Europe. And we usually go to multiple countries. A typical itinerary might go to Holland, to Spain, to the Czech Republic, those kind of things. So we also get a chance to see other cultures, to make friends with players from all over the world. The Europeans are very, very friendly. They treat us really like royalty.
Yeah, and it sounds like these kids are able to, form memories that they'll have for the rest of their lives and friendships as well.
That's definitely the case. First, you're traveling with a team with players from all over the United States. We started out, we were just local Northeast. I live in New England. I belong to the Eastern Division of the USCTA for many years. But we get players from 30, 35, 40 different states. If you name a southern state, I could probably tell you a few players who've gone with us. One of the things, I'll get to this later, but one of the things that's made us proudest is the accomplishments of our players. Even though we take primarily unranked high school varsity players, we've had over 30 players who travel with us and became, we're on the Pro Tour down the road, and people like Luke Jensen or Larry Scott, who was the ATP and now the Pac-12 chairman, and as I said, Mel Purcell, and a bunch of players from the southern section. So it's been very satisfying to see what the players learned on the court, how they improved their games. We've had some remarkable results when players have come back from our trip, that they've been able to accomplish 6 months or a year of tournament play in just 2 or 3 weeks. I should point out, in Europe, you can play in 2 age groups at one time. You can play both singles and doubles. And so our average player plays 3 events per week. Might play a 16-18 singles and a 16 doubles. So even if you lose early, if you're a high school player without experience, you might. Even if you lose early, you still have the opportunity to pile up a lot of matches. I had a player last year who played 37 matches in 3.5 weeks. So talk about gaining match experience. That's one way to do it.
Well, so what is your sense of, so you have these players, American players, you take them over to Europe and they play quite a few matches relative to what they would play at home. But in terms of the European players themselves, I mean, what's your sense as far as the frequency with which they play matches on an ongoing basis? I mean, is that more than what their American peers are doing in general?
Yes, I think actually maybe because the distances are less and they start out, some of them quit school at 16 and they play tennis full time. But then again, they're sponsored by their tennis federations. And when I first started going, and for many years, I actually reported back to the U.S. Tennis Association, who was very interested in knowing which tournaments we went to, were they worthwhile tournaments, and there's a lot more than meets the eye in taking a team. Anybody can jump on a plane and take kids, but are you well planned out? Do you know what hotel you're staying in? You know how to get logistically from one place to another. Have you inspected the hotels? Do you have practice courts? So these are all things that have to be set up in advance. It involves a tremendous amount of logistical, detail, and organizational work. But the answer is Europeans usually get started earlier than we do, and they usually play, a 14-year-old European living in Germany might go to Spain to play a couple of tournaments. And then they have the European Tennis Association has an under 14, under 16 tournament, and then you have the ITF tournaments. These are top-level tournaments, and I try to gear the level of our tournaments we play in to the level of the player. I'm not going to throw in a second doubles player from a high school team who's never played a tournament into an ITF tournament. They wouldn't be accepted anyway. But with our better players, we try to play the ITS. We try to play some of the top competition in the world, basically. So Europeans have demonstrated that they are among the better players around. One of the things the USTA has pointed out is that because Europeans play at such a young age against players from all over Europe, and a lot of players come from Asia, they come from Africa to play the summer circuit in Europe. And our players, we play against each other all the time. So if you're playing a sectional circuit and you play the same kid 4 times in 3 months, here you go to Europe, you play players you've never seen before who have different styles of game. They might hit drop shots, topspin, angle shots, and you get to learn different styles of game. You get to learn different weapons. So I would say the USTA has their player development has gone to Europe. They have talked to European player development programs, and they've implemented a number of things. For example, when we first started going to Europe in 1973, one of the things that struck me was how many team competitions they had. They have under 16 team competition, nation against nation, kind of like Davis Cup or Fed Cup at the junior level. And, when we went over there and when I told the USTA about it, what happened? What happened was zonals, which was a direct, take from the Europeans. The team atmosphere, the idea that the southern section would have a zonal team and go to 2 or 3 different places. So I think we've learned a lot from them. I'm sure they've learned a lot from us about hardcore tennis.
If somebody would like to get started traveling with players in a similar fashion to you, how do you suggest that they do so?
Well, given the shutdown of tourism these days, assuming it resumes, probably the best thing is first gain skill in working with junior players at your local club, attend USPTA conventions, especially the national convention. I cannot tell you how important it is for teaching pros to refer and recommend players to us and to encourage players to go with us. In fact, we offer some generous commissions as a thank you to the home pros. So the first step would be to, get your background, especially in junior tennis, especially from the high school, junior varsity, and varsity level on up. We do not take beginners or intermediates. We only take, or low intermediates. We take people who've mastered the basics and they're ready to play matches. The second thing would probably be to do some sort of an internship. We actually have worked through the various tennis degree programs, Ferris State especially, and Tyler, And we have served as an internship for younger pros who are just starting in. Most of our pros on our staff are between about 21, which is our minimum age because of the chaperoning responsibilities, and up to about 40 or 50 and even older. And we are hands-on, myself and my co-director, Gary Weena. We visit the teams, we help the coaches. We have a 75-page player handbook, staff handbook rather, with all our expertise. So the second point would be maybe to do an internship with us or to apply to be a coach. In fact, the three ways that teaching pros can work with us, and we've had a lot from the Southern, is first, refer players to us, earning the commissions, or customize your own club.
Fantastic. Well, you have built a tremendous business, and you've done a great service to many, many players and coaches. Thanks for presenting today.
Yes. Can I add on the contact information?
Yes.
We have a website for players and parents. It's www.tenniseurope, one word, TennisEurope. And thanks
Absolutely.
for the opportunity to talk to all of our USVTA pros.
Thank you, Dr. Vinokur.